Anyway, welcome to everyone. It's good to see some familiar faces and some people I haven't seen for a few years. I think some maybe 5 or 6 years. So my name is Kate Brown, and I'm the Executive Director of the Global Island Partnership. And this call is largely focused just on what we see as some of the things that came out of the UN Ocean Conference, but specifically in the context of some things that we were engaged with, and we'll hear from uh, a few speakers. Some of the speakers will be me about some of those things, and particularly looking at it in the context of Ireland. So we're going to hear a little bit on the Blue Economy Finance Forum, some stuff on actioning blue, and I'm not sure, Safiya, if you want to go first.
Sure.
Probably better for you in a minute. And the SIDS Conservation Trust Funds that was launched, and also a Leaders Roundtable. There were a lot of amazing island commitments and announcements made during UNOC, and we're not going to go into those in huge detail, but we're going to talk about some of the things that we think that happened that are kind of stepping stones to other things. I'm gonna um, Sorry, there's still got people coming in. I'm gonna actually just change the agenda a little bit and start with Safiya because she has to jump onto another call. And thus I'm going to introduce Safiya, who's actually just our new chair of the board of the Global Island Partnership and also has other roles with the government of Grenada and many other roles. So I'm going to, maybe Safiya, you can introduce yourself with your many roles at the start of your remarks.
Sure. Thanks so much, Kate, and great to see everyone. Kate, I'm just going to ask you for permission to share my screen.
Yeah, it's Jabal. Jabal, can you give permission to share the screen?
Thanks so much. And for those that do not know me, my name is Safiya Sawney. I'm really delighted to now take on the honor of being GLISPA's new chair. Um, in terms of what I do quite a bit. I currently carry the title of Climate Ambassador to the government of Grenada. I'm also a special advisor to Grenada's Minister of Environment, Climate Change, and Renewable Energy. And I'm also the strategic lead for the OECS 30 by 30 transformation program, a program being led by the Spaces Consortium, which includes Campaign for Nature and McKinsey and Company, and being implemented by the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States. So very much aligned to progressing the GBF targets. In addition to that, only because I have to travel to it this week, I'm lead negotiator for Grenada within the plastics treaty negotiations. So really happy to be able to share the perspective of UNOC and one of the other initiatives that I was very fortunate to help develop, Action in Blue, the newest declaration coming out of the Caribbean region, now endorsed by 14 Caribbean governments, endorsed by the Council of Ministers of Environmental Sustainability of the OECS. And it is a direct evolution of efforts in the Caribbean that started in 2008 with the Caribbean Challenge Initiative, where Caribbean leaders focused on taking more leadership and keeping marine protected areas at the top of the political agenda. So this is really an evolution of the work that has been started, um, uh, given the obligations that Caribbean countries have towards the CBD, but really taking ownership of that and ensuring that there are institutions in place or good governance systems. There's enough capacity for us to be able to implement, to not only meet international obligations, but set us on the right path for sustainable development. So I will share my screen and talk a little bit about the process of Action in Blue and the global launch at UNOC. Let's see. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, wonderful. So Action in Blue, as I said, is this political vision that came out of reigniting the work of the Caribbean Challenge Initiative, which is to keep marine protected areas to keep healthy oceans at the top of the political agenda of the Caribbean. We wanted to ensure that the work that we were doing aligned very much with the political momentum that helped to formulate the Global Biodiversity Framework and its targets, particularly Target 3. For us in the Caribbean, there's been quite a bit of a struggle, really, practically to implement these targets, not just terrestrial targets, but also the marine targets. When we did the CCI from 2008 to 2020, we initially started off with a group of 12 countries, and out of those 12 countries, we were able to see progress in 5 countries. Some of those countries that we saw progress in were not the initial set of countries, but they went on to reach their target, which was protecting 20% of their marine and coastal ecosystems by 2020, with at least one country going above and beyond those targets. But what we really saw was a number of countries getting the legislation right, getting the policy framing right, but really struggling on the implementation side. So a lot of essentially paper parks were created and developed in the Caribbean, and the work of ensuring that these parks and these protected areas were effectively managed was still a major gap in implementation. So part of the work of this political vision is to once again let the international community know that the Caribbean is very serious about meeting their obligations, these obligations that have been enshrined nationally as well within the national legislation, but also within the mindset of the Caribbean people. But there are serious gaps to implementation. And part of what we're hoping to do with this political vision is to communicate those gaps, communicate the vision that we have set for ourselves, and also work with a number of strategic partners, including key donors to the region, to help set up a strategic framework to work on catalyzing progress, not only towards management effectiveness, but also looking for new opportunities to set up and structure additional protected areas, also considering the outcomes of the recent BB&J negotiations and the opportunities for securing key areas beyond national jurisdiction within the region as part of that plan. So the political vision document, as I said, has been endorsed by a number of governments. It's also been endorsed by a number of strategic partners. It speaks to the history of the Caribbean in progressing approaches towards securing marine protected areas. It speaks to our commitment that's been enshrined not just within obligations to international conventions, but within regional policy framing and as well as national legislation. It also speaks to some of the key challenges that we face, not just as global small islands, but as Caribbean small islands. And it speaks to our blue future. So a number of actions that we have started to take within the region to ensure that we set ourselves up on a path for success. We work on closing those gaps, and we do a better job at communicating to the international communities our needs and building and retaining our capacity. We also include within the declaration this blue roadmap, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the post-UNOC activities that we have highlighted that we think would allow us to set up a good framing to deliver on this roadmap. So first of all, how did we get here? We started off in 2004 or 2003, sorry. It's been a very long process of pulling together an initial draft for consideration. And this was a direct mandate from 9 ministers of environment within the region to think of what an evolved Caribbean Challenge Initiative declaration could look like and what would be the body that would help deliver the declaration and put in place a platform for success. We pulled together a group of regional organizations. We drafted an initial draft and then set up on the process of socializing with governments. For the global launch of Action in Blue, we sort of set this milestone that we wanted to let the world know that the Caribbean is really working on reigniting its vision when it comes to oceans, guided by the political call to action of 30 by 30. and we looked at UNOC as a key milestone. For UNOC, we decided that we will hold the global launch. Hopefully you can see my entire screen and it's not blocking. Give me 2 seconds. You guys are seeing the full PowerPoint, right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Sorry, on my end, it doesn't look like. Okay, and in terms of the global launch of Action Blue, we decided on having two key events. One would be the official launch, where we brought together a set of governments, a set of partners, and where we also held a sort of symbolic signing ceremony. And the second was to focus in on the key element that underpins our success, which is resourcing and sustainable financing for sustainable implementation. In order to do this, we pulled together a group of regional organizations. We called ourselves a high-level policy working group, and we set ourselves a timeline to the launch of UNOC, of Action in Blue at UNOC. As you can see here, we held a number of meetings. We also consider some key milestones to be able to take good advantage of and leverage in order to support this global launch at UNOC. In terms of the high-level Caribbean policy working group, we set on the goal of working together with the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund, who has led and funded all of this work through support from the Blue Nature Alliance, and working with high-level government representatives. Part of that approach was to not just, while we knew the past efforts with engagement with governments showed their interest, we wanted to lock that interest into a process that governments really trusted. And so we approached the Council of Ministers of Environmental Sustainability of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, as well as the Caribbean Council of Ministers of Environment, within that platform that they use to make decisions and to update ministers and governments on progress of those decisions. We were quite lucky to cement the support of the AOSIS Council of Ministers and also announce to the CARICOM Ministers of Environment this launch. In terms of the task of the high-level policy working group, the goal was to pull together regional organizations that were able to lend not just their expertise and advocacy, but also their key strategic planning to ensure that it aligned with the political will of governments and aligned to closing gaps. So we worked from March, and the idea was to end this policy working group post-UNOC in August. But at a recent meeting, the participants of the high-level policy working group have agreed to extend that work through December, with the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund offering to be the secretariat and continuing to provide secretariat support towards the coordination and convening of these meetings. A meeting happens once a month. We keep it very short for just an hour, and we work on advancing this agenda now. For the launch at UNOC, post-UNOC is working on establishing a platform for supporting the implementation of the declaration. We have co-chairs to the process. At the moment, the Nature Conservancy and Conservation International supporting the CBF with the convening of these meetings. In terms of the regional organizations, here's a snapshot of the regional organizations that have been participating in the policy working group, and we've had active participation from our very first meeting. So we were able to deliver and launch Action in Blue at UNOC. We thought the launch was a very successful one. We were able to bring together a number of high-level representatives, as you can see, from Caribbean islands. We've also had high-level representatives from UN agencies as well. We had at least 3 ministers from Sierra Leone, who's also working on setting up a platform for implementing progress on 30 by 30 and the GBF in Sierra Leone. So it was quite successful. We were able to get some symbolic signatures from a number of governments that worked on reigniting this commitment. In terms of media, so we had a media plan to support this UNOC launch. We got quite a bit of coverage from UN News. We also got a feature in IISD and a number of mentions within regional press. So we found that it was very successfully taken up by the wider community beyond UNOC. So, to talk a little bit about the decisions that were endorsed by the Council of Ministers of Environmental Sustainability of the OECS, they, of course, endorsed the declaration. They also endorsed the work of the High Level Policy Working Group. They also endorsed the role of CBF as a secretariat and the role of the co-chairs, and also worked on endorsing taking this to CARICOM at the next COTED session so that it can be enshrined within the work of the CARICOM and decisions made on environmental progress and sustainability. In terms of next steps, so we've launched this declaration. We've got a lot of endorsements and signatures, a lot of excitement about the potential of this declaration. So what does that mean in practical terms? We have identified within the declaration a set of targets, and these targets are linked to activities that, with the help of the policy working group, with the CBF and other organizations, we're hoping that we're able to meet the actions of these initiatives and activities, and hopefully be able to create a platform that will carry forward the key commitments enshrined within the declaration. So the first, of course, is trying to identify what a practical 30 by 30 ocean protection target is for the Caribbean. So we know that the Caribbean countries are very keen on contributing to the global 30 by 30 goal, but that doesn't necessarily mean that each country will set aside 30%. And so we are hoping to work with governments to have a science-backed ocean protection target that could then enshrine the Caribbean's commitment towards that global 30 by 30 goal. And work has already started within the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund. They have completed an MPA analysis. They're working on establishing an MPA finance facility, and a number of regional organizations like the Nature Conservancy is working with the OECS Commission, Spaces and McKinsey to be able to try to quantify what this target could look like and pull together a set of business cases and work plan to implement it prior to 2030. And then essentially it goes on, the other targets go on to speaking of the role of political advocacy, establishing a regional mechanism. In the region, we have the Ocean Coordination Mechanism, which we actually co-hosted and co-launched the Action in Blue initiative with at UNOC. And we are speaking to Pro-Caribbean and UNDP and UNEP on the potential of aligning this work with the work of the OCM, and hopefully in the future having this absorbed as part of the work of the Ocean Coordination Mechanism, so we're not creating another institution. And really, it's just building on existing efforts. It's not starting anything new to fill gaps. And I think this is really the key message here, is not to just put a declaration, have it be celebrated for just one conference, but really utilizing it to close the key gaps that we have in the region. And I believe this is my very last slide, but I'd like to open up for any questions and any reactions from those of you who were at UNOC and were able to participate in our events.
Thanks, Safiya. And does anyone have any initial questions? I think if not, oh, what's the screen sharing there? If not, I might ask you kind of what do you see as the next big milestones for moving this forward, and um, just learning from the Caribbean Challenge. And I think I can see a few people on here that worked on that initiative. What are some of the kind of things that you have learnt from that you're looking at how to either avoid or build on in the next phase? And then and I'll ask Ariana as well to ask you a question, and then we can have a couple at a time.
Sure. Thanks, Kate, and thanks for those questions. I think those are really important questions. I think first, in terms of the key milestones, so we have this declaration enshrined within the Council of Ministers of OECS. We've been asked by CARICOM to present it as a decision for endorsement at the COTED, the next COTED meeting, which will be held next year. And the idea here, and again, maybe this answers your second question to the Caribbean Challenge Initiative, is to ensure that the declaration very much aligns with the key decisions that governments are taking around progressing and catalyzing biodiversity activities, including approaches that governments are hoping to put in place to support healthy oceans. So I think this is the first thing. When we did the Caribbean Challenge Initiative a number of years ago, we missed the opportunity to present it to the intergovernmental organizations. So while governments were able to enshrine it nationally, there wasn't really a formal process regionally to support the implementation of the Caribbean Challenge Initiative, which put a lot of pressure on the donors to be able to continue to sort of carry the ownership and carry the operational functions. And so this time we've tried a different approach, and right off the bat, because we already had strong signaling from governments over the years, we took it directly to the key bodies within the region that are not just well placed, but are working to increase their capacity to better support governments on implementation. So what does that mean? A lot of the times, these bodies are the organizations that are approached by donors, by multilateral funding agencies to engage governments and work with governments on capacity building, on readiness, and to be able to align implementation activities and national policy activities to obligations that governments have taken under conventions. So they play a very, very critical role. They also have a set of key regional partners. So for the comms, there's a set of strategic partners with a diversity of expertise, science, research, monitoring, analysis, implementation. And so rather than sort of put the onus on the funders to create something new, it's utilizing existing platforms to ensure alignment, to ensure better coordination, and to ensure that implementation activities are not duplicative. And they're working to support the national priorities and the regional priorities of government. It also gives an opportunity to leverage the role of regional coordination. There's certain implementation approaches that need regional coordination to be successful. And it allows the countries to know that they're not working in silos. There's a platform for knowledge exchange. They're able to leverage best practices. It's sort of inclusive. It doesn't leave anyone behind. And then I guess one of the great opportunities here, given that we have the 30 by 30, sort of underpinning a lot of this work, is that we can benefit from cross-regional collaboration. So we had lots of great conversations with other SIDS and regional SIDS on the potential of maybe formalizing better cross-regional dialogue, conversation, coordination, so that we benefit from the solutions and the best practices in areas outside of the Caribbean. And again, we're all leveraging from the same donors, right? And so it's really important that we align not just the political messaging. So what are SIDS? What are special circumstances? But what are the viable solutions that work for us? And how can we maximize the pots of funding that's available to us so that we have a larger impact on the ground? Hopefully that answers your question, Kate.
No, thank you very much. And I also want to acknowledge that you also attended a Pacific 30 by 30 meeting in convening in Nice. And we have another GLISPA coordination call later this today in about 9 hours. I don't know how long away. Later today, where May is going to talk a little bit about the Pacific 30 by 30 space. And I think, and some other people will talk. But Ariana, I see your hand went down,
Yeah,
and I'm
thank
not
you,
sure.
Sophia. I just wanted to talk a little bit about, yeah, financial commitments towards this great initiative, but you kind of answered that question already. So thank you.
Great. And I just maybe to add a little bit on how that it can be practically done, because I think a lot of the times the traditional way is, you launch a declaration, you have a campaign, you set a targets, some random arbitrary target usually in terms of financing because donors tend to respond to that. We're trying to do it a little bit differently. So one of the key initiatives that I've been working on with the OECS Commission and the Spaces Consortium is to really try to quantify in some way what are the key biodiversity targets that we need, what is the ones that are essential for the region to help advance work that they've already started and they've already heavily invested in, but may not see the impact. And then how can we then translate that into a financing opportunity? So it's a more strategic way of leveraging finance because as we know, and for those of us who have engaged with donors, they would say to you, there's a point at which they can't give beyond an initial a grant pledge. And so there's more of a focus on us to look into sustainable financing mechanisms. I think key here is to understand which of the mechanisms that are actually viable for us. What works in the Pacific may not be viable for the Caribbean. So being able to smartly leverage the public financing to unlock some of these opportunities is really key. And I think part of that is ensuring that governments have a good understanding of what is it that they would need to ensure healthy ecosystems, right? And then understanding how that then translates to smartly leveraging finance within implementation system that consists of capacity at the regional level, but enhanced capacity at the national level. So we've started this program, the OECS 30 by 30 transformation program, that is looking at data, it's validating data, it's analyzing data, it's working with countries to try to co-develop these regional initiatives that consider national circumstances, that consider national gaps. We have territories that don't traditionally leverage financing like some of our other governments. How do we then consider financing approaches, sustainable financing approaches for territories as part of a regional model that allows them to get financing in a very consistent way? So we started that work with the OECS, and we're going to continue to do that work. And again, we're not working in silos. We're working with some of these regional organizations that I've placed on the screen in my presentation, most of which have historically engaged in the Caribbean. And so they have a plethora of experience that is really important for us to start to frame smart and more pragmatic approaches to implementation moving forward.
Thanks, Safiya. And I don't know because you have to dash to an AOSIS meeting, but if you want to, Arthur has just asked a question about the recent ICJ outcomes and what you see that in terms of reinforcing SID's efforts around the world. If you had, if you
Sure.
wanted to comment, or if you have to dash,
Yeah,
it's
no,
also.
that's a great question, and I think it's really an extraordinary moment for small and developing states. But I think it's how then we translate that into ensuring that we can move forward. And I think part of what this starts to do is changes the narrative between us and the donor community. So there's been a number of initiatives coming up from the Caribbean, like the Bridgetown initiative that is asking the international community to look at transforming the global financial architecture. So I think these kinds of key decisions coming out from the ICJ is helping to not just allow for advocacy, but then allow for the beginning of the transformation that needs to happen where the international community not just sort of superficially recognizes our special circumstances by just enshrining it into treaties, but really allows there for space for us to be part of the design, be part of the transformation of these financing systems so that they're better catered to our needs.
Yeah, and I think if anyone follows AOSIS on any of their social media, you see a very strong, besides this ICJ opinion, very strong narrative, including at the financing meeting in Spain recently, on things being driven for SIDS that meet SIDS needs. I think this is kind of it's the idea that you can change the table that you sit at. We don't have to accept kind of what people want to give, but can change it. And yeah. Anyway, thank you, Safiya. That was awesome. A lot of information there. I think we'll keep watching. I mean, we're part of the high level, I think I've forgotten the name, but we'll see kind of where that gets to. And then without further ado, I'm going to pass to Angelique from AOSIS, who's going to talk about the Blue Economy Finance Forum, which was one of the big events that happened right before UNOC, that was connected to UNOC. And so over to you, Angelique. And thank you very much for agreeing to take part today.
No, thanks, Kate. And apologies, I wasn't able to make the earlier session, I'm gonna call it. I don't know if it was morning or evening for people. So thanks for the opportunity to share my reflections on the Blue Economy and Finance Forum. So it was the first time that UNOC, well, the organizers of UNOC, the co-host, decided to actually have a set of special events attached to the UN Ocean Conference. And it's really interesting to see somewhat the trio, with UNOC being that central piece around policy and governments, but also elements of like, the action space. Then you had before at the beginning, we had the scientists sort of come in and, tell us what the science saying, tell us about their new findings and so on. And then followed by the finance, right? Around thinking around blue economy and blue finance. So I just full disclosure, I had the privilege of supporting Ambassador Ilana Seed during her time co-chairing the steering committee of the Blue Economy and Finance Forum, which was organized by Monaco. I think you've heard kind of, the big updates around, just pull up sort of the big announcements that were made, and you heard the big numbers at the BEF. A total of 8.7 billion euros was committed to be deployed over the next 5 years by philanthropists, private investors, public banks into regenerative and sustainable blue economy, with 1 billion euros already deployed or is investment ready in 2025. We heard announcements like the cumulative assets under management of institutions endorsing Back Blue Ocean Finance commitment now totals 3 trillion, helping to ensure that a sustainable and regenerative ocean has a voice in finance and insurance decision-making. Okay, sure. Good to hear. Always good to hear. But how much money went to islands? What were the announcements for island nations? And here, the ones that I could at least pick out that were very explicitly, or at least you could see a link directly to islands. I'd pick out about 3 announcements, I would say. First, there was the announcement about the Outrigger Technical Assistance Facility that will start deploying more than $3 million for investment readiness grants and repayable loans to further develop the investable pipelines of island-based projects, right? So this is a impact investment fund. I think Aura sits on the board, or representative of Aura sits on the board of GLISPA, and this is one of their sort of babies they're fostering with the Outrigger Fund. And here, what's really interesting is they've added a technical assistance facility to the fund. And here really to support governments, strengthen their capacities and capabilities for the development of projects, to get them to sort of business ready, right? The other one was the UK announced an investment of 2.8 million pounds to support small island states' blue economies. They also said they would contribute to the BBNJ Voluntary Trust Fund. That's the trust fund that helps pay for small island developing states negotiators to turn up to BBNJ negotiations. As well as an uplift of 4 million pounds to boost the Global Fund for Coral Reefs. This, I'd say, has a link to island nations because the GFCR does have a lot of projects in island nations. And finally, the Development Bank of Latin America and the Caribbean, so here focusing mostly on the Caribbean, announced a 2.5 billion investment in blue economy in the region, including a blue bond. So there were certainly announcements that suggest flow of finance to small islands as a result of this, I'd call it political momentum, beating of the drum from UNOC as well as Beth. Now, I think one thing that stood out for me that I think is worth highlighting about the side events at the Beth, I think they were, in my opinion, planned in a way that allowed for you to either be in the main hall and attend the main event, or be in the side, and you could still attend the side event, so they weren't parallel. What that meant was, folks could actually focus on being in side events. And it was, I think, really great to hear a lot of island perspectives being showcased in the side events themselves, talking about the true cost of doing, investing in SIDS. What are the implications for islands? I'd say three. One is greater attention to the challenges of SIDS. Again, here for me, this really stood out, having speakers like the PS of Fiji really, really task people and challenge people to thinking about this differently. Coral as well, from Norway, really challenging that you can't simply replicate things in island context and expect it to work. And you've got to factor in the fact that the cost of transportation to outer islands is very expensive, and not just speaking in generalities when we talk about investing in the blue economy, but in thinking of different contexts. Here, I think it was telling that there was greater interest. It was a political moment to show commitment to island nations. Of course, I don't know if we, can say that the millions that were pledged is sufficient. It's far from it, but we saw greater interest in doing that. I think an interesting piece of the puzzle is also uh bluing the finance world, I suppose I could put it that way. A lot of comments that we heard from investors was, they were really keen and excited to think more about this and to do more about this. But I think there's a real opportunity for island nations, rather than just waiting for investors. We'll deal with that as they come. But what was very interesting was it was a big moment for blue taxonomy. And here I'm just thinking about the opportunity that we have as islands with the Standing Committee on Finance under the UNFCCC, which will be having a forum on ocean next year. It was I had a fascinating conversation where the GCF, claimed they were the biggest ocean fund. They were one of the biggest ocean funds, of course, after the Jeff. But how do we actually track blue or ocean projects in these climate funds? And I think with the Standing Committee on Finance having a forum on ocean, we can start to think about how do we build blue taxonomy in the climate funds, and really show and have examples, tools for us to continue our political advocacy for greater financial flows to ocean projects in island nations. Thanks, Kate. I'll stop there. Happy to take any questions at the end.
Awesome. Any questions? Now I think Angelique has to go. You have to go, Angelique. Any questions for Angelique? I also wanted to say thanks for all your help, Angelique. I know on our last GLISPA coordination call before UNOC, people were concerned about the visibility of SIDS or the participation of SIDS at the Blue Economy and Finance Forum. But, we work with what we have. There had been an effort to have, in particular, the Conservation Trust Fund lead people who are really working in the space invited. So, and I think what we saw with particularly the island representatives in the side events was really powerful statements. It was, there wasn't huge numbers of island represented there, but there were very powerful speakers and they made a big impact is my reflection on things. So otherwise, I don't see any questions.
I see Leela has a
Oh,
question.
Lila. Yeah, go, Lila. Sorry.
Aloha, everyone. Thanks so much, Angelique. Good to see you all again. As you know, I've worked in Micronesia and the Pacific for so long, and here in Hawaii, which may as well be a small island developing state. And I've always been a practitioner and implementer around conservation. So when I hear these big commitments of dollars, a lot of people could get super excited. It might mean there'd be more implementation on the ground, but I don't really have the strength in policy to know these pledges we hear about. How do we make those a reality? How can we help make sure we have accountability for these folks who made these incredible commitments so that we can make sure the dollars go to the Caribbean where they're supposed to go, Micronesia, Pacific, etc. What can we do to help put put their promises to action?
Yeah, no, thanks for that. And I think it's a mixture of things, but certainly leveraging those bilateral partnerships to ensure accountability, right? Because everybody wants to come with a big announcements to the announcement to this meeting. And we always laugh like what is mobilized, what is pledged versus what is delivered, right? And the gap is oftentimes very significant. So I think it's the accountability piece. We know that members of GLISPA, governments of small island developing states, we now very helpfully have tracked some of these financial commitments. Let's push. Let's continue engaging with our partners, for lack of a better word, and have them make sure that they deliver on it. I didn't mention one announcement because I think it's totally recycled, so I didn't want to go into it. Another announcement that was made was by the EU, where they committed to have 40 million euros to support developing countries to ratify the BBNJ agreement and its early implementation. 44 million euros sounds great, but it was a 2023 announcement. We went back to check when this was originally made because we've heard it for such a long time, and it was announced some 2 years ago. So I think it's an accountability piece in terms of pressing our partners to really deliver on these announcements that they've made. And I'm not sure, but there is an element of how are we tracking the announcements that are made to islands. I don't know that anybody is doing that. So that, if we don't hold them accountable in closed rooms, at least we can hold them accountable in a transparent way to show that, to put a little bit of pressure for them to actually deliver. Thanks.
Yeah, I think you're right, Angelique. We were doing that for a long time in GLISPA, more on island commitments that were made, like bringing them back to say what they've done. But maybe that's what we like on a stage in front of people, and maybe that's what some, without overthinking, maybe that's something that we can think about. How do we do that? Because that, what have you actually done on the thing that you said you were going to do? No point announcing things for like 3 years. Karen, you have a question?
Yeah, it's morning, afternoon, everybody. Just building on Angelique's point, it really is the big announcements are made, and then how much is specifically for islands is the hardest part of that discussion. So, these nice big figures, because they have to be big to get in the news and etc. But how much of that is going to islands becomes the real issue. And in particular, I'll speak, even when you mentioned the one for Latin America and the Caribbean, it's going to be mainly Latin America, and we're going to fight for the bits that will be Caribbean. So I think there is something, as you said, in the closed doors to say, help us. Thank you for the announcement. Please break it down to us so we can help track what is for islands. And we do have to figure out how we play our part in doing that.
Thanks, Karen. One of the things that AOSIS said, I think it made the final talking points, is we need to stop SIDS washing, or maybe I'll say islands washing, right? And like the whole idea that many people like to say they help islands, or a lot of people like to go with pitches to donors and say they're going to help islands, but how much is actually going to islands? And I think that's honest but uncomfortable conversation to be had. And I think, thinking about what we can do as islanders to, yeah, to deal with what is a very real thing, which is SIDS washing or islands washing.
Thank you, Angelique, and thank you very much for that. And I think we'll move to our next speaker. And thanks for taking part. And I think Diego has shared some of what uh, Angelique was talking about in terms of the Outrigger Impact Fund is here. There's a link in the chat, and also the Sea Change Impact Facility Initiative. So some of the things that Aura was announcing or highlighting at the Blue Economy and Finance Forum. So thanks for that. And I'm going to pass to Jabal Hassanali, who's GLISPA's strategy advisor, just to talk a little bit about a new initiative that was launched. It was launched last year, but it had its first workshop at UNOC. Over to you, Jabal.
Thanks, Kate. Yes, so I'm just going to talk briefly, as I know we're running short on time, on our initiative around conservation trust funds and organizing a community of practice for SIDS conservation trust funds because they have unique challenges in the different SIDS regions. This, as Kate explained, was launched during the last Biodiversity Cup, but UNOC presented a great opportunity because a lot of the SIDS CTFs that are part of our membership were present in person at UNOC, and so it was a great opportunity to have our first in-person workshop and really drill down what we want this conservation trust fund community practice to accomplish, knowing that we don't want to add an extra burden to our members. They're already very stressed for time in terms of their capacity and what they can accomplish. So we want this community practice to be as meaningful to them as possible. So having them in the room gave us opportunity to drill down in terms of what they want to accomplish with this community practice and how we'll go about it and how we'll organize the membership and the governance and the engagement strategies going forward into making this a really useful community practice for our members. So it brought together key CTF leaders across SIDS. We have members in the AIS region, such as SACAT. We have in the Pacific region, Micronesia Conservation Trust Fund, and also the now Niue Oceanwide Trust. And also we've had members in the Caribbean, the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund, and also their national partners that they work with in the region. So the Belize Fund was also there as part of this inaugural workshop. We had a lot planned in the 2 hours, but just because we wanted to maximize the opportunity as much as possible. But what we really were able to accomplish over the time was our situational stocktake to prioritize the key challenges we want this community practice to tackle, and also an exercise to really drill down how this will work in practice in terms of how SIDS CTFs could become members in the community practice if there are organizations that are not conservation trust funds, how they join, the governance around how this is done and how they're going to meet in the future, knowing that this is a global initiative and we're working across really tough time zones. How would that work in practice going forward when we don't have the opportunity to meet in person? And thankfully, we were able to reach consensus on a lot of these questions, these hard questions, which makes it easier going forward now. So our next meeting will be in August, and it'll be virtually, and it takes everything that we learned in this workshop in terms of putting it together to make sure that it's useful. Um, just a little breakdown of our core membership and that who is there. And besides those actual SIDS conservation trust funds, we also had a lot of supporters of conservation trust funds that work in and out of SIDS regions that were also there, the Conservation Finance Alliance, CFA. We also had SPC. We also had um, the World Wildlife Fund, a lot of organizations that are interested in supporting conservation trust funds and also maybe developing conservation trust funds within SIDS regions as well that will probably be future members of this community of practice. So all in all, we had a great group, about 20 persons who were there. Um, really dynamic discussions, flowed really well, and I think it's a great first step in terms of making this a really good reality. and we just wanted to share about it. So that's it for now. Happy to take any questions. I'm going to put in the chat a fact sheet on the community on the Conservation Trust Fund community of practice in terms of how can get involved. If you know our conservation trust funds within the regions, the different regions, who you think will want to be part of this initiative, you'll get that information in the fact sheet on how to get connected. If you just want to support, also what we figured out in the meeting was two tiers of membership. We have the full memberships and also associate members for organizations that want to support, if they are donors, if they are just interested in actually helping develop community conservation trust funds of their own, they will also have an opportunity to be members. We set up a coordinated committee among our core membership, and they will sort of look at the associate member applications and decide who can be observers in the meetings and so on. So all that is being organized in governance of the committee of practice, and we're just happy for others to spread the word about it, and also if you're interested to get in contact with me, I'll put the details in the chat. And I think that's it. I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah, are there any questions initially for Jabal? I think one of the things that powerfully came out, and I think heard Safiya talking about it a little bit earlier, is the interregional learning. And I think one of the reasons this Conservation Trust Fund Community of Practice came about is the recognition, both in terms of the special issues that small island developing states conservation trust funds face, because they have a kind of a slightly different role than in other places. And secondly, that just from an advocacy perspective on this mechanism and on, the needs, that they can have a much stronger voice if they work together. And so this Conservation Trust Fund Community of Practice is really looking at both of those elements. So what they can learn from each other, but also how they advocate together on this issue. And having said that, tomorrow and for the next couple of days, and I think I saw Fabian on here earlier, there is the Caribbean Conservation Finance Congress happening, organized by Caribbean Biodiversity Fund, happening for the next couple of days. If people are not aware or not, I think if you're in the Caribbean, you're probably very aware. I just put it in the chat. But yeah, so look out for more things coming from this specific group. Are there any questions? I don't think so. That was very comprehensive. If not, I'm going to ask Emily from RARE, who we also worked with at Paula will just get us to Emily's piece. Emily from RARE, who will go next, mostly just because she needs to go to a different meeting after this.
Thanks, Kate. And yeah, sorry to throw off the flow. I can see I might be able to, I think, Paula, you have my slides, but I think I can also share my own screen. Actually, it might be easier. Does that work?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So thanks, Kate, for giving us a space to update on the local leaders roundtable. We hosted at UNOC. We did this together with GLISPA, the local 2030 Islands network, and the Bloomberg Ocean Initiative. And we really wanted to host an event here. Sorry, I have lots of things popping up on my screen at the same time. We wanted to host an event here that recognized and prioritized sort of the action happening around the world on the ground, really profile bright spots happening already, and also give local leaders the space to call for the action required to support them in driving change on the ground. So the focus of this event was really engaging the mayors and local leaders attending UNOC to create a dedicated space for that learning and exchange. We hosted this event the day after the Ocean Rise Resilience Summit, which was specifically for local governments. And we did that on purpose because we really wanted to give sort of the mayors from the summit the opportunity to sort of engage more deeply in dialogue and also bring together the community and fishing leaders attending UNOC into a dedicated space as well. And we also can't, I think, talk about this event without acknowledging the efforts of sort of the many organizers and translators who enabled us to have this really incredible simultaneous translation throughout. We also had language-specific breakout groups in 5 different languages as part of the session so that we could really enable that robust exchange. And one of the goals and sort of main outcomes of this event was sort of a joint call to action of the workshop that was really sort of directed to the global and national policymakers at UNOC. I don't want to read this full statement to you, but you can see that some of the priority areas that surfaced here, really on recognizing the role of local leaders and customary authorities for SDGs 13 and 14. Number 3, on facilitating local access to data for science-based decision-making and connecting with local and traditional knowledge. 4, on developing these long-term financing streams that also build in sort of the local capacity to access, absorb, and utilize that funding. And on 6, prioritizing peer-to-peer learnings and exchange between national policymakers, local leaders, customary authorities at these different events. And I will include the link to that joint statement in the chat as we're talking so you can read the full statement. Next steps of this event, we were really excited about the structure of this event, and we're exploring where we might be interested in hosting sort of follow-up events of this really collaborative exchange and style that we can take forward. We're also working on advancing the call to action as part of COP30 programming. We're looking into those opportunities right now, including with the pre-COP Local Leaders Forum. And I'll just say thank you to everyone who helped both organize the event and help connect us to your networks of local leaders and policymakers attending UNOC. And if you have any questions or want to follow up, please let us know. Thanks,
you. Emily. And I think this was a really awesome event because it's just a different audience than, so you have the Blue Economy Finance Forum, for example, is one set of people meeting together, but this was really focused on local leadership, whatever that meant, traditional leadership or, mayors or the like. And it is an unusual group of people to bring together around these conversations. So we're really looking forward to looking at kind of how we continue to do something like this. I think for people that have been in GLISPA for a long time, it's very, and have seen us work together with RARE for like 10 years on convening, taking the opportunity of people coming to convene those conversations. And we also want to thank people. There's some people on this call that helped us find some of the people that participated. But yeah, it's look how you do this without having to raise 7 million bazillion dollars. This was really looking at how do we do something with the people that are already coming. So it's not a perfect process, but it is really, I think, had some impact from my perspective, and just really making sure that local leadership again is considered in some of these things, and looking at some of the solutions and creating some of those relationships between people. But are there any questions that anyone has for Emily? If not, we will also share the summary out after this thing, and are likely to do something together. And I think I actually absolutely have no idea who's next now. Paula, who's next? Cameron. Good. Cameron, over to you, because we just jumped around. Sorry. Cameron is going to give us, so there was also one of the other side meetings, well, side events, large side events, congresses. At UNOC was the One Science Congress. And if we recall, before UNOC, we had a number of coordination meetings in which Cameron kind of said what his perspectives were going into that. And now we're going to ask him, after having gone to that, kind of to give us a short briefing on kind of what he thinks came out of that, and then what does that mean for islands?
No problem at all. I'm just going to upload a document for you all very quickly so that you all have it. There you go. That should be in the chat very soon. And hi, everybody. The One Ocean Science Congress. What to say? Huge gathering of scientists, was hailed, I think, by the mayor of Nice at its opening as the most important scientific gathering on the ocean since the end of the Second World War. And he might not be wrong. There was a huge amount of events unfortunately, all at the same time, all running parallel, and all on really interesting stuff going on. Um, some may have different perspectives, but I felt that there was some really new and innovative and interesting science and knowledge that was presented, but there was a lot of stuff that I think we'd already heard before that was recycled and packaged so that it could get represented at the One Ocean Science Congress, and contribute to the whole. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but what it does mean is that you really did have to filter what you wanted to see to sometimes find out anything new, uh, and perhaps from the theoretical to the looking for really practically based science that could help advance ocean protection or development agendas and things like that. What came out of it overall was a series of 10 thematic recommendations from the scientific committee that were drawn from all of the various contributions, and were made to heads of state and government at UNOC that urged action on a whole range of issues going from climate and biodiversity to ocean government and equity. And that's in the document that I've uploaded. Some of the key priorities are transforming our relationship with the ocean through responsibility, respect, and inclusive knowledge systems, accelerating ocean-based climate solutions that are aligned with the Paris Agreement, protecting and restoring marine ecosystems, and pausing harmful deep sea activities, ending IUU fishing and eliminating harmful subsidies and promoting sustainable ocean food systems, and then investing in transdisciplinary ocean science that can inform and drive policy and innovation. From an islands perspective, I don't think the word island figures at all in those 10 recommendations. And the word developing figures in there, but for 3 references to developing countries. So under generating transdisciplinary knowledge, fostering capacity sharing and technology transfer, and ensuring sharing of benefits that is equitable, that is derived from marine genetic resources. There was a lot of science based on islands and provided by island scientists, that's for sure. But the question now is going to be, where do we go from here? What happens with these recommendations? Was it just a massive show and tell and these recommendations get forgotten? Yes, the final declaration from UNOC took on board the need for high quality science to drive a sustainable ocean future. But as we've seen under the UN Decade for Ocean Science, the question is, you can sign up to these commitments, but is there actually sufficient funding going into the science that is required to better understand the ocean and its ecosystem services, for preservation, for mitigation of harmful effects on the ocean, and all of the multiple areas of scientific research that we would need to have a really holistic view of how we treat the global ocean, not only as an issue in and of itself, but in terms of its interactions with biodiversity, with climate, with sustainable human development, with health, all of that sort of stuff. And so I think that for me, it was valuable in terms of getting science on the agenda and a very strong UNOC declaration on the importance of science. But I think the jury is still out on whether that weight will be carried through and really transformed into transformative scientific action that will inform the transformative action that everybody is saying that we need to, reverse the tide on declining ocean health. So a positive event overall, a lot of enthusiasm from the scientific community, a huge amount of commitment from the scientific community to be there and to develop the proposals and to work on influencing the policy space. My concern is, in particular in the current climate, that we will not necessarily have the public or private financing that is required to deliver on the level of scientific ambition that's been shown and to use and develop the solutions that we have demonstrated are really there. So that's a brief take from me. I'm happy to answer any questions. Yeah, there we go.
Thank you so much, Cameron, and some really thank you for the outcome document. I hadn't actually seen that. Are there any questions of Cameron? If not, I have a question. Cameron, what do you think like the recommendation is to the people that work on islands for how something like this might be useful to them or different in a future in future? And also maybe you can also touch on the other thing you were working on, which was the island restoration decade.
Okay, sure. For scientists, I think in the future, maybe what we need to think about is, and potentially that's a role for GLISPA, as a convening platform and a pre-event coordination platform to give greater visibility and agency to either scientists that are from islands and or scientists that are working very closely with and share the values of islands and that can be used in a positive way to demonstrate A, the solutions that exist out there, B, the science-based policy decisions that have to be made, and some of the risks and vulnerabilities and opportunities that are out there. I think, unfortunately, this time there was a lot of island stuff, but it was not clearly identified in the mix of everything else that was there at the Scientific Congress. And we could perhaps have, if we'd thought about it in the lead up, really demonstrated not only that you can commend the leadership of SIDS or islands in various policy spaces, but we would have had an opportunity to shine a light on the leadership of SIDS-based scientists and SIDS-generated science to take forward some of these ocean solutions. So perhaps that's a thought for the future in terms of how we might better make the most of these opportunities that are there. On the island decade, the idea that we are trying to take forward, and it's going to be an online vote on this particular motion at the IUCN WCC coming up, is the motion number 71, a decade, the call for a decade of island resilience. We floated that idea with a number of delegations and a number of our partners. Most of the feedback was pretty positive in terms of understanding how it could help continue to prioritize islands as solutions to a number of these global crises and challenges that we are facing, and to continue to attract capacity, capability, funding, friendship, and advocacy to islands in that space, in particular, as we look to craft the next generation of whatever the Universal Sustainable Development Goals will be post 2030. There was some reticence around the use of the word resilience because certain countries, I think, felt that it portrayed islands and in particular SIDS as vulnerable and victims, which isn't the intent, but it's always good to have that feedback and see how we can craft the messaging around it as we move forward. And then there were questions around, how is it going to be funded? Is this going to be a mechanism or a process that would be in competition with the outcomes and the work plan from SIDS 4? How do we make it all mutually reinforcing rather than sort of something that might divide attention and funding and action? And so there was a lot of useful feedback on it, whilst generally, I think probably 90% of the feedback that we received was really positive. None of it was overtly negative, like, no, we're not interested in it, but some of it was reserved, pending the ability to clarify the interrelationships between ongoing SIDS processes and our initiative, which is not just about SIDS, but is about islands more broadly, including from large developed nations that actually have islands as well that need attention and care, and making sure that we can coordinate all of that appropriately so that it doesn't take away from SIDS initiatives, it actually reinforces them at the same time as ensuring that we can deal holistically with islands that might be part of other groupings.
Yes, that's the road we often are navigating as well, Cameron. And there is one question from Emma about ICRI or the GCRMN at the Science Congress.
I'll have to look and see whether ICRI was there. I suspect someone from ICRI was there. Coral is mentioned all over the final outcomes of the declaration, all over. There are 3 mentions of corals, okay, as part of the fundamental ecosystems that make up the ocean and its value. I can't recall anything specific, but I'd have to go back and look through my notes, okay, on ICRI specifically.
Awesome, thank you. To the other thing that we thought was interesting at UNOC, which was we worked with the Micronesia Conservation Trust to convene a Pacific 30 by 30 conversation, and really want to say thanks to Safiya for coming to share the Caribbean experience in that. So we're really looking at how do we help with some of this interregional inspiration. And there's also a report out of that Pacific 30 by 30 kind of high level report that talks about some of the things. But that was really an effort to bring together a dialogue in looking at who was in at UNOC to talk about what does this look like in the region, and kind of building on lots of things that exist, like the UBPP, and I can't remember what that stands, Unlocking Blue Prosperity Partnership, maybe. So there's kind of these things are trying to build on each other, and people are trying to share what they know and what they can do. And I think that in itself is part of a kind of a powerful story coming out of UNOC to me. Now, what we've got, if does anyone have any questions for Karen or me about those things, and we can share more information about all of that. But in terms of oh, here we are. What we wanted to do was give people present the opportunity to kind of share some of their reflections coming out of, I think even our speakers, if you wanted to say something else, you are very welcome to, but sharing some of their perspectives and some of the things that they might have observed or felt were really relevant and important for islands coming out of UNOC and kind of where that's taking us to next. And if no one puts their hand up, I will call on you. So just letting you know that. So maybe I'll call on Stacey because she hasn't said anything. And she is one of our members. So Stacey, do you have any thoughts on particularly WCS? You had your Women Ocean Guardians.
Yeah, sure. I knew you were going to call on me, Kate. Yeah, I mean, it was one of the most exciting things for us during the week was to launch with a number of different partners this new Women Ocean Guardians initiative, which is trying to elevate the voices of frontline women, stewards of the ocean, whether they're fishers, whether they're managers of coastal areas or MPAs, into important policy discussions, whether that's at the local level, national level, or regional or global level. So we're happy that the Global Environment Facility announced their approval and intention to fund $4 million. And the idea is to set up these regional hubs that help support women. So there will be a hub in the Caribbean. We're looking at a hub in Coral Triangle. So a lot of these are island states. The third one I don't remember, but stay tuned for more information on that as that's an emerging initiative that we're looking to bring in as many partners as possible. There's a voluntary UNOC commitment that partners and governments can sign on to. We had the governments of the UK, Grenada sign on at the event, and then we've subsequently had Germany sign on as well. And I'm forgetting one that signed on as well. Sorry if they're here. But yeah, that was a super exciting thing. We also announced an Ocean Accelerator Fund that's helping to support 30 by 30 action in countries around the world, but in particular, many island countries as well. So there will be opportunities to potentially partner with organizations who, in terms of recipient of this funding, we have been supporting a lot of the work through the Caribbean Biological Corridor in terms of regional 30 by 30 planning. So our reach even extends beyond where WCS has field programs. I'll stop there.
That's awesome. And Can you, if you have anything that you can share, I think that's so exciting. I did hear a story about Safiya, that's our board chair, giving a story at your Women Ocean Guardians launch that was very moving about her mother, I believe. So yeah, I think that's awesome. Um, Let me see who else is it? What other? Lila, you can talk for the Blue Nature Alliance.
I'm trying to find my unmute button on the phone. There's a lot to say about the Blue Nature Alliance and oceans. I think it was the only time I got to see all of our partners except Emma, who's on the line. Every single one of our partners was there. It was so incredible to see everyone in one space in that 7 days of flurry, including so many on the phone. It's so good to see you again. And I did sign on to the Women Ocean Guardians, not just personally, Stacy, but also as the Blue Nature Alliance. And because at CI also we have a shared partner that works with Pamela, right? Pamela Castillo, who's leading that with you, Stacy. Yeah. So that was exciting. We had incredible participation from the Western Indian Ocean as far as islands go. We had our Micronesia partners with May Adams and Micronesia Conservation Trust. We had Karen McDonald with the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund. When it comes to islands representing and the portfolio of the Alliance, every single island chain was covered. And not just one time. This was like regular side event sessions in the blue zone and the green zone, continuously seeing our partners converge. And like what Kate said with her hands, I can't do holding my phone, but everybody was converging and weaving around each other in a really supportive, non-competitive kind of way, because let's be honest, we all want the same things. And you can tell when you go to one event after another and you keep seeing your partners there. And we being there was just like incredible. Not just myself, there was a team of like almost 10, 15 of us. And I do capacity and learning, and all of my partners were there. So for the sites and all the regional officers like Mael from Miraldu, Karen, Joaquin was not there because he was having his new baby, his first baby. He couldn't make it to UNOC, which is so exciting. But Nico was there for the Western Indian Ocean Islands. All of our regional officers, Bene from Indonesia and Philippines. It was really incredible to see them all in action with all of our partners around the world, both country partners, partners in collaborations like Kate and GLISPA. MPA Connects, I think wasn't there this time, but the rest of our MPA network partners were. So very exciting. Personally, we also launched the MPA community of practice for MPA capacity, where Kate and others on the phone are involved with an effort to think deeply about how we can move the system that's preventing us from really scaling capacity in area-based conservation spaces around the world. We have known, and everyone on this call knows, funding is great, but if it's not delivered the right way, how good would those big billion-dollar commitments be if they're all wasted or corrupted when they get to countries, or when we try to get them to the ground and somehow they never do? Or we just don't understand why we're not able to share that narrative clearly about why area-based conservation matters to community enough for institutional agencies and nonprofits to really make the traction they need in each country. It just seems like there's still a disconnect in country around how important these areas could be for the future, for resilience, for sustainability, for food and water, and all of the benefits that they provide when they're managed well. And the last area we're working on is around people power, which is related, is, how can we invest time and money in realizing how important stakeholder inclusion is, not just saying it, yes, we checked the box, they came to an informant meeting, but they actually have roles to play in enforcement. This is an area where there's overlap with the Women Ocean Guardians program, right? What role do women play in MPAs around the world? We need to be able to invest in that and practice that and share it around the world so we could replicate it across regions around the world. So we've been really excited. There was 200 people involved with over 7 workshops and sessions that we had, content around, always experiential and interactive. And a big highlight was the community of practice launching with you, Kate, for having so many friends in the room and just feeling like so great. This is finally lifting for islands. Thank you so much. It was really an incredible week.
Thank you. Awesome. Thanks, Lila. And Claire, that was going to be you next from SBC.
Yes. Sorry. Do you expect me to present
Just some thoughts that you have on kind of what you see as some big highlights coming out of out of UNOC, particularly from SPC Pacific perspective?
Yeah, so SPC has been attending most of the events that has been presented there, and I agree that it has been an incredible week, and we have a high-level delegation with our DG, lots of directors, so it was really wonderful. Some of our scientists also attended the first part of the UNOC, the scientific conference. And yes, I think for us, the visibility of the Pacific was really great, thanks to many kind of commitments, of interaction, and the fact that SPC, SPREP, OPOC, and PIF, FFA have been able to design this guideline with shared commitment or share ideas on specific issues that can be brought to the table and to the side event in the same way by all the Pacific leaders, make these messages very clear and very visible. So yeah, I think that the way we have been able to coordinate our support to our members was great. And the thing that also we finally signed this MOU between GLISPA / Local 2030 and SPC is for me a big achievement. I think the flexibility of GLISPA for me is really the best model in terms of support of our Pacific region, and SPC would like to be more active with the GLISPA family, and so we just recently had a discussion between Kate and Cole on the fact that we will see if SPC can become an official member of GLISPA. So yes, that's all on my side. Thank you very much, Kate.
Thanks, Anne-Claire, and we would be very happy for that to happen, so that would be awesome. I'm going to ask if anyone has any things, or I might ask Hyacinth or Diego, whichever one of you. Hyacinth, if you have a minute, we have 5 minutes. If you want to share some observations from the IUCN perspective, and then straight after that, Diego from Aura. But it's also fine if you don't want to, because we can just wrap up.
Hi, Kate. Thank you. So I'll have to say I wasn't fully involved in UNOC from the IUCN perspective. Hello, everyone. So for me, I'm kind of following. I've been following to understand what has been happening. Oh, let me turn on my camera, sorry. Following the perspectives and just trying to get a better understanding of where we're at, where islands are going. But I do know that from the IUCN perspective, there is a big support on the policy elements that I hope we can see some support coming through on these. Where it comes to islands specifically, I think there's still a lot of work to be done on how we can be bringing, I think, some more direct support to the process. So Cameron, your motion that you mentioned, I'm curious to see where that is and how that may come through at the World Conservation Congress. But for me, I'm just happy to see that the islands were visible based on your feedback, very visible at UNOC, and looking forward to seeing how we could mobilize a little bit better, at least from our side, to support the process going forward.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll be in touch, Hyacinth, on that. And some good reflections there. And Diego, I don't know if you want to say anything. You don't actually have to, but you're also welcome to.
Yes, no, thank you so much. Well, I wasn't in person in Monaco or Nice, but I was working behind the scenes supporting my team attending. And I just want to echo what Angelique mentioned at the very beginning, that there was a deliberate effort to invite and include voices from seas and islands. And we have a lot of work still to do. And this first step, like outrigger that she mentioned, that was one of the announcements, and other instruments that we aim to, or the Alliance and other partners are aiming to deploy on islands. This is just the first step, and we need to continue working and including the voices of states in this relevant for us. So that's our little grain of sand that we're contributing to. But yeah, a lot more work to do, but I think this is a great start.
Yes, I also think so as well. And thank you so much for that. I'm going to enable us to to leave, but just saying some final things. We'll send out a summary of this, and also, some of the very thoughtful kind of follow-up things that people have talked about. We will put some thought into future conversations, etc. I think what we didn't brief in this thing was our Bob Marley night, so that's a bit of a opportunity. Did have a very good interregional exchange at a Bob Marley night, during karaoke night during UNOC, so that one highlight. But yeah, no, I think I really want to thank everyone for joining us, and also all those people that presented and spoke, and all the people that we work together with in at UNOC and in preparation for UNOC. These types of conversations are really important, just to reflect a little bit when we're still fresh-ish. I'm not that fresh, but fresh-ish from that space. What do we take from it, and kind of how do we move forward in a like together, as Nyla said. So thank you, everyone, and thanks. We'll talk again, I'm sure. See ya.
Thank you so much. Kia ora.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you. Take care.